Hey everyone, this is Freddie with Superbike Unlimited, and technically this video could be seen as an update, but we're just going to start a whole new series, and I'll explain why in a minute. But we're going to basically be building an R1 Superbike, and kind of a continuance of the last video we made, where we made an announcement that we were going to try to get back into MotoAmerica. We're definitely doing that. We've decided just to dive right in, and we are building ground up brand new Yamaha YZF-R1 Superbike from the chassis up. So basically, technically we're still going to have our sort of stock bike that we've showed you before, but since we're doing this a little bit differently now with a much more serious focus, the intent to actually compete in the Superbike class, we're just getting all new stuff and few things that we intended to use with the old one, but for the most part we're just starting from scratch. So we're going to get right to it. One of the first things that you're going to see here, obviously the kind of the skeleton of the motorcycle, if you will. We have this one of several Superbike frames that we have, and essentially what makes this frame special versus, say, a standard frame, there has been several modifications, some I'm not going to go into, but the biggest and most obvious one is it's been custom machined in this area here, and the reason for that is to allow adjustment of swing arm pivot. And a big part of that is because, Dunlop tires in the USA have changed quite a bit in recent years, and there's been several profile changes that have affected tire height and things like that, and all of that directly affects the chassis, anti-squat, swing arm angle, things like that. So relative to your geometry in the motorcycle, it's important that you're able to adjust that to get those values in an ideal range for whatever you're trying to achieve. So we're going to start with that. Our other frame, which is actually over there, that's the bike that you saw before. We hadn't done that. So, and then moving from there, we're going to be using some really cool parts from our good friends Evol Technology. They're making a bunch of triple clamps and rear sets and various other hard parts that we're going to use on this motorcycle, pretty much to our spec. And essentially what we're going to be doing is the triple clamps that we're going to use, they're going to have a couple of different adjustments. So they're going to have rake adjustment, which is actually head angle, so like if you're looking at a motorcycle like this one, rake is going to be just quite literally the angle of the fork, in, out, that kind of thing. That's your rake angle. And then we're going to have offset adjustment, which is these inserts here, and offset is going to be center line of fork to center line of steering stem. Adjusting that affects trail, which in turn changes the way the bike steers effectively. You can make the bike feel more nimble, easier to turn, or you can make the bike feel more stable, you could say. So that's going to be, sorry about that. And so we're going to be doing that, and then from there we have a few other things that we're still working with those guys. So we're actually rapid prototyping a bunch of parts right now just to test fit and make some changes on our motorcycle. So for example, we have these damper mounts that we are 3D printing just to finalize some design things. This is just a few different, the geometry is slightly different on these. Mounting is a little different on this one. You can see this has a flat surface. This one kind of has like a conical surface. That's for clearance purposes. And yeah, that's the great thing with us about working with these guys, is they're making all of these really cool custom components to use with our motorcycle. So next, what we're going to start doing is we're going to start building up this chassis. You can see that we have our triple clamp set sitting there, and that's going to be for our new Superbike forks, which have a bit of a larger upper clamping diameter, and then a same still 58 millimeter lower clamping diameter. So had to get a whole new set of clamps, and we're going to start mounting those up next, and then we're going to start building this thing up, putting our Superbike engine in, and turning it into a full Superbike. And actually, we just got a really good surprise package a couple of days early, so we're going to be doing some things a little bit differently on this motorcycle. Suspension wise, we've always been a big fan of Öhlins, and so in no way is it a slight for us to use something else, but I couldn't help but notice how well Batubo has been doing in the British Superbike Championship. If you haven't been able to watch that series, it's kind of hard to watch in the US, but the factory Yamaha program over there won a championship using Batubo suspension front and rear, and just in general, they've shown an incredible level of performance over there. If I'm not mistaken, at one of their tests, they were just a couple of tenths off of the world Superbike lap record. Using production Pirelli tires, and British Superbike motorcycles have no rider aids whatsoever, so no TC, literally nothing. So all the strategies that we are able to take advantage of here and in World Superbike, they don't have any of that stuff. So to have a motorcycle working that good, it's got to have some pretty damn good suspension. So we just got a really nice care package from Batubo, and we're gonna start cutting this stuff open and having a look at what we got. All right, so we got the first box open here. This looks like it's gonna be a set of forks. That's our cartridge tool that you get with these. And that is our World Superbike Spec Batubo fork. It is a beautiful piece of machine. What's really cool about these also is they're 780 millimeters in length, which is a bit more than we get with some of the other manufacturers, and just gives us that extra little bit of adjustment. They also use a special spring that has a super finished surface to try to minimize any potential drag or stiction inside the cartridge, which is really cool. All right, guys, so we've got everything opened up and laid out, and essentially what we have here, a range of springs for the Superbike fork, a handful of shock springs, and we have a couple of our Superbike shocks. We actually have 3 of these. One of these you saw in our other video, and I'll show you again in a minute. And the reason why we're doing that is inevitably initially we're gonna go ahead and try a few different dry settings and try to find some settings that we like. And when we're kind of settled what kind of the window that we're going to operate in, we're likely going to go ahead and set one of those up with a wet setting. You know, we'll consult with Batubo. We have, fortunately, access to their factory race technician who services the World Superbike paddock and British Superbike paddock, and he'll help us kind of end up where we're going to be. So the nice thing about these shocks, and one of the big things that I'm excited about them, aside from the fact you can just see this is a really proper shock absorber, has pneumatic preload, which is for those of you that don't know, essentially using this nipple, you use a nitrogen canister that will, when attached, it's going to basically push this ring down, and then you can mechanically adjust your preload. You disconnect the nipple and it locks it in place. There's no way for that to fail like a hydraulic preload adjuster potentially can, and it's a really fast and lightweight way to adjust preload. And then up here we have our compression and rebound adjusters, and what differentiates this shock from, say, a traditional Superbike shock or something from Öhlins is we actually have high-speed adjustment. And essentially, with an Öhlins shock absorber like an RSP40, which is what we've used in the past, you have to open the shock and service it, change the shim stack. That's the only way to change the high-speed range of the shock absorber. With this, we get a little more freedom there. We can actually just turn that adjuster. So, and here you can see it's a little bit of a mess because we have kind of limited space right now. But this is our one of our other Batubo shocks, and it's already fitted with one of the linkages that we're going to test with our Suitor swing arm. So yeah, while I'm going to go ahead and start putting all this stuff away except for one set, and Martin is actually preparing our Evol Technology clamps. We're going to get those put in, so we'll check back in with you in just a moment. All right, so Martin's got this triple clamp kit installed, and there's a couple of options available from Evol Technology for this bike, and for, I think, pretty much any modern superbike, that have essentially different flex characteristics. We're opting for the Pro Cross, they're called, which is essentially a stiffer triple clamp option. And you know, we have the option to change the upper clamp later on if we were to decide to use the other one, but for now we're going to go with this. And it's got a distinctively different look. I'll show you the other one in a minute, but this is what we're going to start with. And next, Martin's going to grab a set of these Superbike forks, and we're going to start putting those on. All right, everybody, so we're back at it today. We've had a lot of small jobs, kind of like what I've been mentioning previously, making these little brackets and little small things that are details on these motorcycles, but you'd be amazed at how much time it actually takes to get them right and to get them made. And then we've also just found some small issues going through some of our materials. We found that some of the stuff we thought we had electronically, like there's to complete this motorcycle with the Superbike electronics that we're going to use, there are probably somewhere in the neighborhood, I'll have to go through our entire document sheet, but maybe 20 harnesses and sub-harnesses. And some of those sub-harnesses may just be very small extensions or things like that, from, say, to like a sensor to the main harness. But there's a lot of components that you need to have this thing complete and actually functioning properly. And we found that some of them were missing, and some of them are actually pretty vital. So as we began to lay all that out yesterday, we identified that. So we've got some more stuff coming in, and we're probably going to have to get some stuff made. We're going to make a few things here in house, just small sub harnesses and things like that. But while we're waiting on some of those things, we're back at it today. So Martin is actually getting ready to fit our Superbike radiator and oil cooler set. Of course, that's required because, again, this is a Superbike spec engine that's making a substantial amount more power than a standard engine. And typically with that power comes a lot more heat. So we have to manage that with a proper cooler. And while he's doing that, we're going to show you, we also went ahead and designed a really nice fender mount set. This is the final product, which our good friend Steve from Evolve Technology is the guy that actually came up with this final shape here. We just provided geometry by making some rather crude brackets that were sort of just very quickly done like this. These were in no way meant to be like a final product, but more or less just to get geometry and determine exactly what was needed to design something like what you see here. So, and again, this is just for fitment purposes. We're not going to use, obviously this would probably fail in the blink of an eye if we actually ran that on a motorcycle. So we're getting these machined and we're going to run those out of aluminum. But what's nice about this is going to allow us to use basically a standard style fender. And we have some components on the way that will allow us to use like a Superbike style fender that may have slightly better aerodynamics versus the OEM one. But for the time being, we're going to want to use like an R1M style OEM fender because they're readily available and it just simplifies our process. Right now, it's just important that we get this thing ready. Obviously, we're very late. So while we do want to focus on the details, we have to make sure also that we're practical and get this thing rolling. So also today, we're going to try to go ahead and fit our exhaust. And for the time being, we're going to be using this Yoshimura Superbike system, which is what we used at Westby Racing. Makes great power and tried and true. And as you can see, it's already fitted with our individual lambdas, which are vital for cylinder tuning. And we're just going to go ahead and put that on. And then moving along, we have some really cool components that we got from our good friends Yamaha Europe racing division, of course. These are basically just part of the factory tail assembly and subframe section. We're going to get all that mounted up. We've got, this is essentially an inertial platform and GPS. So this is like your IMU, where we get our lean angle and essentially all the different axes of acceleration force. That's what this comes from. And something that's kind of a cool detail, these are used, and some of you guys may recognize those initials. These are, this component was very likely on a motorcycle that won a world championship in World Superbike, so that's pretty cool. And then next we just have several sensors, button pods, throttle, sub harnesses, things like I was talking about. This is going to go with the throttle body. You can see there's just a lot of components. You can see some of the stuff that we're laying out and kind of just going through. This is largely stuff that we actually can't use. These are more or less going to be a few bits that we can use, but mostly that's stuff that we're just going to keep for connector spares, frankly. But yeah, so today we've got a full load. And then I just want to share this. We've actually got a really cool product from our good friend Jeff at Brake Tech. We've got some prototype Superbike rotors. And while these look very similar to the ones that you've seen on our motorcycle, obviously there's some aesthetic differences just in terms of carrier and rivet color, but the big difference, you can see this pad swept area here, and we'll measure them just to compare with the calipers, but this is a true narrowband disc. So this is going to be designed to use with our Brembo Superbike rotors. And essentially we're just eliminating extra mass that we don't need. The production rotor that we're using is a semi-narrowband. What's on the bike right now works great. I mean, been proven in Superbike infinitely, but this system essentially is going to reduce the inner diameter, or this part here is going to be moved from here, say, to here. And what that does is just eliminate mass. And of course, since we're on a wheel, we want to have the least amount of unnecessary mass possible. So that's the idea there. We've got a couple of sets of those. Those are something we're going to test. We're going to keep our other several sets on the standard disc because this is literally a prototype that's completely untested, but I'm confident they're going to perform well. Just in case we do need to change, we'll have other sets. So Martin has a special part that we're going to be using, which is essentially a World Superbike clutch basket that is lighter and effectively has a shorter service life, but it's going to extract a bit more performance out of the engine. That's a product that we get from Suter. It's made specifically for the World Superbike program. It's not available to sale for the public, but something we're going to be using. If you use these, you just have to be really careful and track your mileage, as you should anyway, but just to make sure you don't overextend this thing, because if you run it past its life cycle, you could have a pretty serious failure. All right, guys, so we're chipping along here. We've got a decent bit of little progress. We're kind of just mocking stuff up, so there's going to be a lot of these bits that are coming back off, but we'll show you kind of where we're at. We got our clip-ons from Evol Technology, and we have a different braking system that we're going to use. We are using Brembo stuff. For now, we've just got this master cylinder mounted for dimensional purposes. It's going to wind up being it's basically the same dimensions as the one we're going to use, so it's perfect for this situation. But we've gone ahead and mounted our previous generation World Superbike caliper. We got our cooler mounted up partially. We had to kind of mock this up because there's going to be some work there. We'll go into that in a minute. And then we're starting to just lay out some electronics. We've got our handlebar switches installed. We've got one of the twist grips installed. We've got some of our limb components mounted up, lambdas and stuff like that. Stuff kind of just laid in here. We've got our Morelli ECU in here. This, you may notice that we don't have a proper swing arm pivot. This is just a temporary placeholder just so we can kind of fit everything. We're waiting on this to come in. It's a special pivot. And on this side, you can see some of the custom parts. So we're actually changing this one a bit. And one of the parts that we've worked with Steve at Evol Technology to make is this special damper bracket that interfaces with his Superbike triple clamp. And this is just a prototype part. Again, one that we've 3D printed and test fitted on our other bike, which you can see on one of the other chassis over here. Stuff everywhere. So you can see there, that's kind of the one that we tested. And so that's the working version here. And it looks like it's going to do just fine. Minimalist design and perfectly functional, kind of just loosely fitted right now. And one thing I just wanted to kind of cover, in the past, we've always used Motec on a lot of these projects, and I'm a huge fan of Motec products. And, there's probably going to be some questions about why we didn't run that this time. So the reason for that is actually really simple. It comes down to a couple of things. One, factory support. And by factory, I mean the motorcycle factory, this obviously being Yamaha, and regulations in our series. So performance-wise, a Motec ECU and a Morelli ECU, the hardware itself, they're capable of performing at essentially the same level. They're both used at very high levels of motorsport. Morelli more so on the motorcycle side. But, really the big thing that kind of drives this stuff is that with the system we're using, it's being developed by the factory in World Superbike. And so it's very specific to this motorcycle, and there are strategies and settings that have been developed by engineers that are trying to win world championships, which really helps us save time effectively. And then the other big consideration is that MotoAmerica, with the current regulations, have really kind of put Motec at a bit of a disadvantage technically. The firmware is just a bit restricted, and that's something that may change, but for the time being, it's just, especially with the short amount of time that we're dealing with here, and because we have factory support and approval, it just made sense to run this in this application. I still love Motec, and I would absolutely love to do a Motec based Superbike with Yamaha, but for now this is just the logical choice. So this is what we're using. Not available to the public. This is just for supported programs, but this is just a Morelli MLE series ECU, and it does have the factory World Superbike spec firmware in it. So yeah, so what we're doing right now is just laying all this stuff out. We're going to have to make some stuff because we don't have every harness, sub-harness, bit that we needed. I think I mentioned that previously. So there's a few that we're going to have to make for like our rear light, for our dash. We're going to have to make that sub-harness. Few other just little odds and ends. So we'll show some of that later. That'll be fun. And then we're getting some other bits. There's a part that's missing right now, but there's basically a box that goes right here that has several connectors. And that's going to be one of the primary pieces that's lacking right now. And then there's several other sub harnesses that are going to go with this. So yeah, more to come, but I just wanted to show you guys. It's starting to look a little more like a motorcycle. For sure, I think there's going to be some challenges ahead. We have some, this beautiful subframe and tail section assembly. With the way we're going to be interfacing this with the fuel tank and stuff that we're running, very likely we're going to have some trouble just putting it on there. Like, it's almost certainly not going to just mix and match the way we would like. So inevitably we're going to have to start making some stuff. And back to this, another thing, this system, it comes out of the box ready to basically mount onto a standard motorcycle. A guy that wanted to go, superbike racing on a pretty standard bike or super stock racing or whatever. And this is a great system for that. However, as a result, the mounting bracket that it comes with, which is this guy right here, really doesn't account for some of the other modifications that we've done. Namely, we've got the Superbike oil pan, we've got this Superbike exhaust system that route completely different from standard. So that means that this bracket no longer really clears everything and simply doesn't work anymore. So we're going to have to probably design another system. We're going to use, you know, something like an area like this somewhere on the engine, and design a different support system just to interface with this lower area and keep the radiator pulled back. So, you know, kind of a pain, but this is just stuff that happens. We're going to reach out and just see if they have something that's a turnkey solution. If not, no big deal. We'll just design something and get that sorted. Hey guys, so back in the office again today, and I and Martin are grinding away at this thing. It's been a real collaboration between the guys here at the shop and the people that are helping us remotely. And so right now there's a lot of stuff that's coming back off. We're just kind of just laying things in and just test fitting some stuff, still trying to figure out what we're missing, what we need to make, what we need to modify. Right now what we have is a used World Superbike tank that's obviously been in a gravel trap at some point. Just fitting all this stuff in here, and don't mind all the wiring that's everywhere. We're kind of just making sub harnesses and power harnesses and things like that. So stuff's kind of just hanging in there right now. In no way is that permanent or final in terms of routing, but you can kind of see it's slowly starting to look a little bit more like a motorcycle. We've still got a lot of work to do here. We do have a 3D printed fender bracket. I can't remember if I've showed you guys that yet, but this is actually going to be a functional one. This is a carbon reinforced nylon product, so we can use that until we're getting our billet ones. We have our World Superbike air intake duct and dash holders in. 3D printed front box is kind of just resting in place right now. We're starting to just slowly get everything in place. And again, we still have a ways to go, but it's nice to see that we're starting to look like a motorcycle. We're making some parts right now in our 3D printer that we're going to be using in a moment. This is a prototype, but basically we have just a holder for a neutral lockout. This is just going to kind of go in here. You can kind of get the idea there. That's just a plastic that can't be used. And we're making some more pot mounts. Again, we just make those out of a carbon fiber reinforced nylon, and then we have these little titanium ball joint things, whatever you want to call them, that we get made that we put on there. So yeah, just wanted to give you guys a quick overview. We have this really trick piece from our partner ZVol Technology. They made this damper mount for us on the frame. It has some revised geometry and some revised mounting angles here just to try to give us a little bit more clearance and freedom there without binding. This is actually a 3D printed aluminum piece, which is really cool. You don't get to see that very often, but pretty interesting. And then again, I think I showed you guys this. This is the final version of the prototype that we test fitted earlier. So got our damper solution finalized. Now we just need to keep going through the harness. We have found some issues. So it's a bit complicated dealing with some of this stuff because some of the, some of the components we're using are used, and we got some stuff that was not generationally correct. So what that means is there's been, the R1 looks very similar to say like a 15 to 19, that, 15 to now, aesthetically, there's kind of subtle changes. And overall the bike, it's not an entirely new motorcycle. They're kind of like updates versus total new generation stuff. So we got some of our harness bits looked correct, kind of just giving them a cursory examination, but when we went to go start laying everything out, we realized, oh, this is not correct. So we're having to get some stuff made to correct that and deal with that. A good friend, Oscar Zelaya, who owns an electronics company that specializes in making looms and race support and things like that, they're making some pieces that we need that are on the more complicated side, and then we're going to make a whole bunch of the smaller ones here. I think I've already mentioned that a couple of times, but we'll go into that a bit later. Another thing I wanted to show that was really cool, we've got, for pressing in the head cups and stuff, it's kind of a complicated process. We have a special tool, but it still wasn't perfect. And again, ZVol Technology coming through in a clinch made these really cool kind of inserts that we're going to use with the tool that we have, and we'll show you how to use that. It's a two-step process, A step, B step, and essentially what this will do will ensure almost a perfectly aligned fitment as we're pushing in that cup, which really just makes it go in easier and ensures there's not any damage to the parts. So we'll show that later. Really helpful. Stuff like this can just make the job so much easier. So thanks a lot to Evol Technology for providing these, and we'll show you how they work later. All right, guys, so we're going to start wrapping this video up for this first one because, again, we've got a half an hour long video, and I don't want this thing to be any longer. But we'll give you a few more quick updates. So just some progress stuff here. We've gotten a bit further along. It may not look like it, but there's a lot of small things that have to be done, as we've already discussed many times. But so we've gotten our dashes programmed, and we'll show this later, but this is actually just the same type of I2M chrome that we sell on the website, SuperbikeUnlimited.com, but it's the version that essentially what we do is it's got a different firmware that allows it to function with the very specific Morelli hardware that we're using. So we'll show you what that looks like turned on. It's actually really cool. It's got a really nice race page, and then all the technician pages are super helpful and clear. So excited to see that. We've got those all programmed and updated. We've had some issues with this carbon or this 3D printed box that we showed you earlier. You can see where we've kind of tried to modify it a little bit, but essentially just this thing is not going to work because the material thickness is way off. So we're having to redesign this, and we're going to update some things because I don't like this. So we'll show you an updated version of that. We're going to start printing that today. We actually got our good friends Evol Technology 3D printed some of these fender mounts that we had jointly designed, and man, I'm really impressed with that. It just looks super cool, and apparently is as strong as billet if done correctly. So that should be a great final piece. And then we've got some long-awaited hardware parts that are going to allow us to start really finishing fitment, because there's as you can see, this assembly-wise, it doesn't look like we've gotten much further, and that's because we've been awaiting some really specific hardware and brackets to allow us to complete fitting our World Superbike bodywork and fuel tank stuff. It's just stuff that we technically could have made, but since the Yamaha Europe has that stuff on the shelf, it just made much more sense to order it, and it's finally getting delivered today. So we'll have that in the next video for sure, along with some nice technical updates that we're getting. We're getting some upgrades. I don't want to go into too much detail. We'll have to show you later, but some really cool stuff coming in, and we should really start having this bike actually get wrapped up in the next couple of days. So I'm excited about that, and we're going to document everything just like before. But I think for now that's going to do it. I will show you, because you guys saw the prototype neutral lockout bracket. We have the first working prototype version in there. That's, again, just a carbon fiber printed product. And again, this is just our switch that allows us to use our transmission without going into neutral unless we want to. Essentially, this gearbox is neutral at the bottom and then goes 1 through 6. So this switch allows it to actually go into neutral. So when it's in the race position, the bike cannot go into neutral. So really cool feature, World Superbike stuff, and it just makes shifts better, no false neutrals, first to second is much quicker. It's got some obvious benefits. So I think that's going to do it for this one. We're going to have some really nice updates in the next video. It's actually going to start looking like a complete motorcycle. Again, some really nice upgrades coming in, and then we're going to start working on our second chassis. We have pretty much everything in we need to start getting that going. And so I think that's going to be a wrap. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.